the common thread largely is a lot of fatherless homes with moms that are just in survival mode. If you were to have a conversation with one of our students that's living in that situation and they're just kind of living life on their terms, doing what they want, what advice would you give them right now?
I would tell them all the things that happened to me, but I also would understand that it probably wouldn't matter because they don't know or respect me enough. I would love the ability to earn their respect, to be able to tell them that I know this is no fun right now, but I promise you, you're going to be glad you did it. The best example I can give you, and I don't know if it's the answer, if it's the right answer, the people I did respect and learn from that kept me straight and narrow were the coaches that I coached with.
Welcome to the Elevated Hope Project, a podcast dedicated to celebrating stories of resilience, transformation, and second chances. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Elevated Education, an organization that serves at-risk students through innovative schools like East Point High School, Elevated Academy, and Accelerated Learning Center. At Elevated Education, we believe in the power of education to change lives and create hope where it's needed most. Today, we're honored to share the incredible story of Mike Broomhead, and I'll let him get into introducing himself, but someone that I have listened to for years and years and years, very much aligned with your thought processes and your take on things, particularly as it comes to education and the things that we need to see continue to improve and the value of a school choice system.
Sure.
And just honored to have you here.
I'm honored to be here. You guys are terrific. I love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Last chances, man. I tell you, it's something else.
Yeah, just giving kids that opportunity to give it one more shot. And then when they fall down, give it one more. Keep standing up. So that's what it's all about for us. So if you wouldn't mind giving an introduction to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm in radio and television, which I never thought I would do. I have a show called The Mike Broomhead Show on KTAR from 8 to noon. I have a television show called Broomhead on CW7 that airs on Sunday evenings. And I do a podcast called Amazing Arizonans. And it's strange to be in the media. I was always I was a listener when I was younger. I came from the construction world, and the rules on a construction site are whoever's on the job site first picks the radio station. And it's always the old guys that show up first, and they always pick talk radio. So I kind of grew up listening to Limbaugh and I was always kind of a fan. Never imagined I'd do this for a living, but it's a great way to make a living.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. When you were in the construction trade, did you ever imagine that you would have been, talking on the radio about today's issues? And
never.
Yeah.
Not in a million years. I kind of helped. When I say raise my brother, it's a strong word, but my youngest brother is 7 years younger than me. Father was out of the picture. So I kind of filled that role as much as I could. I coached his teams. And when he was playing high school baseball, I would announce the baseball games. That's the closest I've ever come, was sitting in a booth and announcing a high school baseball. I never had aspirations of any kind of public speaking.
Yeah. You always had that radio voice, I guess.
I did. I never was afraid of it. I could have a conversation with a perfect stranger. I've always been outgoing, but and radio's weird because I was public speaking before I was in radio. I got a lot of public speaking for a few years after my brother was killed in Iraq. My middle brother, Tom, was killed in Iraq. And an audience you can always connect with. When you're funny, when you're not. Radio, you go into a soundproof room, you put on headphones, and I describe it like getting caught singing in your car. That's what it feels like. You're talking to yourself, and I talk with my hands, and now we have cameras. So I still talk like that, and it's weird to sit in a room by yourself and just talk out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I know the feeling, like when we film social media content, it's just like me and a camera, and then Steph, our producer, it feels really weird. You have to get used to it.
Especially when you're in a studio where there's windows. We have big windows. And every once in a while, guests are walking through the building. And it's like, now I know what those monkeys feel like at the zoo. Because it's weird that all of a sudden they're watching you and you're talking, and it is strange.
Yeah.
But it's so much fun.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for being here. And really what I want for our listeners, I've heard some of your story just through listening to you on the radio, You joined us at our professional development event, and
That was a cool event.
Yeah, thanks. And just kind of laid out some more of your story there that I hadn't heard before. And I think our listeners would just be inspired by that. I think you connect missionally with us and, what we do day in and day out. So if you don't mind, let's kind of start from your early years of your life and where you were raised, your family dynamic, all those kinds of things.
I was born in Northeast Ohio. I was actually born in the city of Cleveland, but I lived in farm country up in Northeast Ohio in a little town that's in suburbs now, but it was farms then. It was called Newberry. I was a good reader. Learned to read early. My parents were married until I was 14, but my father was absent. He was an alcoholic. And so I had there was a disconnect, but my mother's father lived right behind us and he kind of filled in that role for me. So he was kind of the hardworking. He was a retired mechanic, leader of the pack, and kind of instilled in me, being the oldest brother like he was, kind of that leadership mentality. But as far as education goes, I had early education. I went to a Catholic school for a couple of years. I was the best reader in my school. So I was a student that excelled. When we moved to Florida and we were disconnected, I think, just in hindsight, from that family unit. It was just the immediate family and the dysfunction that was going on there. I just at 12 years old decided that I wanted to grow up, and I quit really at the end of middle school. Closer to 14, I was done. And I was working. I started working at 12, almost full-time by the time I was 15. I was working in a restaurant bar. So I was working until 1 o'clock in the morning and then trying to get up and go to high school. And I just had no interest. And it just, to me, seemed like a grind. I was just doing what I needed to do to get out. At 17 years old, I'll never forget it, my junior year in high school. And I wasn't a bad kid. I just was the class clown. I just didn't care. I got caught skipping 14 days of school in a row. I had teachers that thought that I had moved. When I went to one of my classes, my teacher thought I had moved. The dean of students, my poor mom, single mom at this time, my parents were divorced, pulled us into a meeting, and we for sure thought we were going to get the, Mike, you're such a smart kid, time to buckle down. And his name's Bill Geddes. I'm still friends with Mr. Geddes. Mr. Geddes pulled me into his office with my mother and said his exact words were, "Mike, high school's not for everyone."
Yikes.
And maybe you want to join the Army. And I was 17 years old and I joined the Army without a high school diploma when you could still do that.
Wow.
Blew out my knee in basic training, so I don't consider myself a veteran. I was in my last week of basic training. So here I was at 18 years old, or still 17, not even 18 yet. 17 years old, military out of the question, no high school diploma, didn't know what I was going to do next.
Yeah.
And fell into the trades at 18. I had gotten my GED. I finally went and passed that test and went to work. And it clicked. I don't know what it does for everybody else, but at 18 years old, I loved the trades. I was an electrician. And I just thought, I'm going to do this. I love this. Well, everything you do as an electrician is either an algebraic equation or geometry.
Yeah.
You have to learn, you have to be a good reader. You've got to be able to read blueprints or what's called a spec book. It's the specifications for a job, and the book is usually this thick. And if I did not have the basic tool belt, if I hadn't had those teachers at a young age that gave me the skills, even when I had the opportunity, I'd have been doomed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my respect for education started. And then it became a passion as I got older, realizing that there were teachers that tolerated me because their job was to teach me. And I wish I could go back and apologize. I was such a goofy kid. This is a true story. I'll never forget her. Her name was Sister St. Richard. I got her so mad she threw her keys at me. That's how frustrated I could get someone.
Yeah.
But they never gave up on me. I was, at that time, a good student and a good reader, and I got away with a lot because I was a good student. But as I got older, those teachers were still there every day grinding it out like they do. Thank God. Imagine the job I'm in now where I spend the first 3 hours of my day reading. That's all I do is read. If I wasn't able to comprehend, if I didn't have reading comprehension, if I couldn't turn around and give a book report for 4 hours every day, and someone gave me this awesome opportunity, but I didn't have the ability. And I thank God for it every day.
Yeah.
What along the way, 'cause you kind of glossed over it real quick. You said you went back and got your GED.
Yeah.
What made you pause and realize I at least better do this? Or was it somebody, or was that just in you and said, I need to just get this done? And second, that's not an easy test.
It wasn't a hard test for me. That's the disappointment when I look back, because it wasn't a difficult test. It wasn't as if I was failing with knowledge. I just had no desire. I got my GED because I felt like a failure without it.
Hmm.
And it felt like an easy way to not have to go back and finish high school. And that's a horrible answer, but that's just the truth.
So that was more internal rather.
Well, because I wanted to go to work. I didn't want to go back to school. I certainly didn't want to go back, and it would have been, I turned 18 in June. So the next school year, I would have had to go back as a junior in high school at 18 years old. And I didn't want to do that. I would have been in the same grade as my youngest brother, or my middle brother, the one who was killed. I'd have been in the same class with my brother that was 2 years younger than me.
That would have been.
So I felt like a failure without it. So I went and took the test. You know, the biggest disappointment for me, it's weird that you brought that up. To this day, I can say that I've never really finished anything. I didn't walk the stage. I didn't get a diploma. I took the shortcut. I always took a shortcut. And it's kind of molded now as I get older to finish what I start, because now I want to go and get a college degree. I would like to be college educated. I'd put my knowledge up against a lot of people that have a college degree,
Sure.
but they had the discipline. They went and did the coursework. And I can't say that I've ever done that. And that really disappoints me. But then it was an easy way to get on with life. Now I feel like I missed a step and I wish I had. You can't go back, but I wish I could.
Interesting. What would you study?
If I could do anything,
Yeah.
I'd love an American history degree.
Okay.
If I could get an American history degree, I'd love it. Poli-science
Mm-hmm.
would be a great degree for me for what I do. I love those two areas. Even a world history degree, but I think specifically American history interests me. I love the connection of how the country, as young as it is, has grown and how it was formed, and the great fortune that we've had, the blessings of this nation, and how other country, France comes alongside and helps us and win a war and everybody thought we'd ever be able to accomplish, and what we've turned into in just a relatively short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
I love those stories.
I think you could probably intimidate some professors if you stepped into their class.
Well, either that or I'd get thrown out, because there is a butting of heads sometimes, but there is commonality. There are certain things that are factual that you can't get past, and I'd love to study those. Growing up as I did in the South, I moved to Southwest Florida in 1977, so it wasn't far removed from the Civil Rights Movement. And I remember being a student of Martin Luther King Jr. and reading about, because I grew up in what was really systemic racism. There were still the unwritten rules of the South. There was literally on the east part of our town, and it was a beautiful place to grow up. I don't want to give a bad image of it, but there was railroad tracks on the east side of town. And after dark, we didn't go on that side of the tracks.
Yeah.
And the people that lived on the other side of the tracks didn't come on our side. And that was a reality. And how we got from where we were to there was an accomplishment. But where we are now, I remember the Klan was still marching. Everybody booed them and nobody listened to them, but they were still getting permits and marching when I was a kid. And that kind of American history and how we were there in the 70s, where are we now? I like that study, and I would love to be able to do that.
That would be cool. Okay, so I'm going to change topics slightly
Okay.
because I want to circle back to something that you said in your story, which we talk a lot about the importance of community in supporting, especially students getting through their education, and how important it is that community that surrounds you. And it sounds like in your story, when your community changed for you, you moved from one state to another, you lost some family support. That's when your education changed as well. Do you align with that? Does that?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the thing that was missing. My mom was thrown into a situation where she really had no marketable skills at the time. My father left her high and dry to raise 3 boys. I was 14, my brother Tom was 12, and Brian was 7. And so she worked 3 jobs. She didn't have the time to help me with my homework. And I wasn't at a place where she was going to tell me what to do. And so when I was able to just say, I'm doing what I want, she'd go to bed because she had to work in the morning. I'd jump out my bedroom window and be out all night with my friends. And my grandfather had passed away when I was 9. There was no one there to sit me down and tell me how stupid I was being. And I think we all need that at some point. We hate it when we hear it, but we miss it when we don't. And I didn't have that. And it's not an excuse, it's just a reality. So the community, the part of it where there's an example and someone that holds you to a higher standard, that's earned the right to have your respect. So when you tell me I'm doing something wrong, I don't care if I don't know you. I think a lot of us are that way.
True.
But when it's somebody you admire and someone you respect that tells you what you're doing is disappointing, I think that changes behavior, and that community is a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, we see so many of our students in a very similar situation to that. The common thread largely is a lot of fatherless homes with moms that are just in survival mode, right? They're just trying to get bills paid, trying to keep a roof over their kids' heads. If you were to have a conversation with one of our students that's living in that situation and they're just kind of living life on their terms, doing what they want, jumping out the window and staying out all night, what advice would you give them right now?
I would tell them all the things that happened to me, but I also would understand that it probably wouldn't matter because they don't know or respect me enough. I would love the ability to earn their respect, to be able to tell them that I know this is no fun right now, but I promise you, you're going to be glad you did it. The best example I can give you, and I don't know if it's the answer, if it's the right answer, the people I did respect and learn from that kept me straight and narrow were the coaches that I coached with. There was a reality for my brother Tom and I. We actually had a conversation at 18 and 16. I was 18, Tom was 16. And the conversation was, if we don't change how we behave, he's going to turn out just like us. And we had really kind of given up on ourselves, if that makes sense, that we kind of knew we were just going to be what we were going to be, but we wanted him to be more. So I was coaching his teams and I did that. And it was the men, the older men, the dads that were coaching their sons that kind of were that mechanism for me. And I watched these kids. We recruited Pop Warner football in Florida. Football in Florida is different. No offense. Arizona's got great football here, but it's a religion in Florida.
Yeah,
it is.
Sure.
I was teammates with Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders and I were Pop Warner teammates. 60 kids tried out for a 30-man roster at 11 years old. They cut kids at 11.
Yeah.
That's how it was. We had our recruiting area was a town that was pretty underprivileged. A lot of single parent homes. Kids couldn't afford the fees to join the league, and we'd raise the money. But we had a standard. And if you didn't get a B average, you didn't play. If you didn't do your homework, you brought your homework to practice. And instead of practicing with the team, you sat on the picnic tables and you did your homework. And if you don't practice, you don't play. So on Saturday, you're a water boy. You're not a player. And we took a bunch of kids that hadn't won a game in 2 years. And when I left in 1995 to come here the next season, those kids won a national Pop Warner championship, but they all had a B average.
That's incredible.
So the answer to your question is a long answer, but it was people invested in these kids, and we were hard on those kids. We made them be self-disciplined. When they were with us, they were self-disciplined. You want to play football, you do your schoolwork. If you want to play football for us, you'll get good grades. And we earned their respect. So when we said, knock it off, that's not how you talk to your mother. They listened, but we had to earn that respect. So an answer to your question would be, I would love to earn their respect to be able to say to them, you're going to regret what you're doing. It feels right now, but there's going to come a day, even if your life works out well, that you're going to regret this time, because it's my biggest regret.
That's such a good point. I think especially in all the noise that these kids hear, there's a lot of advice out there that they can hear just by scrolling their phone, good advice, bad advice. But, the relationships that they have with people like their teachers, their mentors, their coaches, that's probably the only stuff that they're ever going to listen to, especially because there's so much noise out there. They've already filtered it.
I can't even imagine with the cell phones, with the access to Instagram and Snapchat and all the different platforms where you can be fed what you want to hear. You're good enough and all these things that feel good, or that the people that you're talking to you really don't care about. Whatever is being told to them, they can hear what they want to hear so much easier, because I didn't have that kind of a distraction and I was still a distracted kid.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So
to kind of jump back to your story, I think you left off, you were getting into the trades. Do you feel like that's like the absolute best spot you could have landed at the time?
yeah, because I was working, there was no forethought. I had no plan. I worked to get paid on Friday, to spend my money and be broke on Monday, to start all over again. And at 18, I was working in restaurants, and I was working at a gas station overnight. And my friend had gotten a job as an apprentice electrician, and it was paying about $1 more an hour. The minimum wage back then was $3.35 an hour, and this was paying like $4.50 or something an hour.
Big money.
Big money. And so I said, yeah, heck yes, I'll do that.
So when a desire to be an electrician, it was $1.
It was $1.
Yeah.
But I quickly learned to love it. I loved the accomplishment part of it. I loved at the end of the day, you can see how much you had gotten done. And then I worked for people that were really good at it. And when they would teach me and I would catch on and they would tell me that I was good at it, all that started to work for me within 6 years. So 4 years to become a journeyman electrician. I became a journeyman right away, passed the test, became a journeyman electrician within 6 years. So from 18 to 24. At 24 years old, I was the manager, the service manager for a small company, which was very small. There were only 5 or 6 guys that worked there. But I became the boss at 24. I went from an 18-year-old kid who knew nothing to managing half a guy's company.
Yeah.
That was a huge accomplishment for me. I felt like I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof. That avenue for me, it wasn't about, I didn't have the forethought of at the time, and I wish I did, this is going to be a career path for me. This was a better job. But it was the love for it once I got into it that made me want to be as good at it as I could be.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in, forcing people into those leadership positions as young as possible. I mean, both of us experienced that, getting into upper leadership in our, around the same time, 24 to 26. And the growth that comes from that it's incredible because you have to step up and step up quickly if you're going to go from peer to now boss and command the respect and the rest of that from a crew, especially in the construction industry. Like that's got to be a big transition. What did you lean into to kind of start developing yourself as a leader? Because it had to have happened at that point in time.
It goes back to my grandfather that I talked about. My grandfather was like John Wayne to me when I was a little kid. He could fix anything. He was a retired mechanic. He could build anything. He would fix the neighbors' cars, and I would stand in the garage and hand him tools. And we'd go to the junkyard, and he built a trailer for his tractor at his house. And I would help him build stuff. And he just felt like somebody that could do anything. As a matter of fact, I remember him. I know this is off topic, but I remember when how young and how long ago this was. He was working on a car in his garage, and he said to me, "You better learn how to work on your own car, because by the time you're old enough to buy a new car, they're going to cost $5,000. I think I paid more than taxes on the last car I bought.
Yeah.
I remember him saying that to me. But he was the leader in our family. He was the patriarch of the entire family. My aunts and uncles came to him. We all went to their house. And he instilled in me, and I think he saw what my home life was like when he was diagnosed with cancer. I remember him taking me into the backyard and explaining to me, I'm the oldest and it's my job to take care of my mother and it's my job to take care of my little brothers. And basically told me about knights and honor and dignity and instilled in me, and he told me I was a leader. I'm in charge. I'm the head of the household. And I think at 9 years old, I just believed it. That was my job. And so when I got older and I became the boss, that was the example for me. He was honest and he worked hard and he told the truth and he said the hard things, and he wasn't always nice. If you were doing something dumb, he told you. But I think that's where the leadership came from, was that picture of him.
Yeah.
Man, it really is kind of simple when you think about he told you you were the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And at that age, you believed it. And the confidence that I was just thinking about the fact that you were in leadership at such a young age, and that confidence that you must have had at that time, and how that's built over the years now into things that you're doing that you probably would never have done if you had never been told you were a leader and you never felt that sort of like, I can do anything. I can do this. I can be a leader at 24.
Especially when it came from someone that I really believed could do anything. When he told me I could too, that was the greatest thing I ever heard. It made me feel like I was destined to be a leader. And I don't think I understood that at 9, but when you ask the question, it's exactly the time in my life when I thought, okay, I'm in charge.
Well, kind of goes back to what you said about, the advice you'd give someone that was maybe in the same circumstances you were in, that you have to first build that respect and that trust. And I think that feeds in perfectly into what we do and what we ask our staff to do, is that they have to establish that relationship first, build that trust first, because otherwise it's all empty words, right?
Yeah.
Those words actually then mean something. And I think in that scenario with your grandfather, those words meant more than something. They probably meant everything at the time.
Yeah. And when you see a kid who is rebellious, but they also are self-confident. I think that's the building block for me. I remember standing up for myself. I had a job, one of the jobs I had, I don't know why I remember these dumb places, but I had a job at a buffet restaurant called the Banana Boat, and I was 13.
Sounds delicious.
It was so bad. It was so bad. And I walked in one day and the owner said, "We're closed. We're out of business." And I said, "Okay, where's my paycheck?" He says, "Nobody's getting a paycheck." I said, "Oh, I'm getting a paycheck." I was 13. I'm getting a paycheck. I said, "If you don't pay me, I'll have the TV station down here saying you had a 13-year-old kid you didn't pay." And he went and pulled cash out of his pocket and he paid me. So there was an element in me that still had a little bit of self-respect. And I think if you can just see that in a young person, that they haven't given up on themselves, never give up on them.
Yeah.
There's a spark in there that someday, because I remember, I don't know why I had the ability to stand up to a grown man and tell him, "Oh, you're going to pay me." I was 13, father out of the picture. I wasn't necessarily rude, but I was certainly like any other adult would be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Assertive.
Myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you can see that in someone, they haven't given up on themselves. And that's a good sign.
Yeah, we see that all the time with students we work with. They'll be rebellious and overly confident and, just a spark plug. And it's like, yes, once we can unlock that potential, that's one of our future leaders. That's a future entrepreneur. Those are the mover and shaker type of personalities that we love to just help them channel that and focus it, and they can change the world.
My grandfather, when I was a kid, my mom, we drove our mom crazy, all three of us, rambunctious and crazy. My grandfather said, "I'd rather have a kid that you got to yank the reins than use the whip to get him motivated. Rather have to pull him back than have to get him motivated to go do something."
That was you.
That was me. Oh,
And that rebellion too shows rebellion in of itself is leadership, because you care about something. It might not be what everyone else wants you to care about, but rebellion says you care about something enough to fight for it. And it comes out in this rebellious way, but that's a leadership trait. And non-rebellious people, I don't know, are they good leaders?
yeah. I was talking to my mother on the way here, and I don't know what we were really talking about, but somehow when I was a kid came up. I said I was just such a maniac. She goes, "You weren't a maniac. You were just always right. You always thought you were right." And I thought, yeah, I guess that I did. You're right. I was rebellious. I was just, I used to see, I'll pay for my own mistakes. I'm going to make the mistakes, but I'll pay for my own mistakes. How dumb. You just keep running into the wall. Eventually you figure out it hurts, but I just told her I'm going to just keep running into the wall. And she had to sit there and watch me run headfirst into the wall.
Then you learned how to build that wall.
Yeah, eventually.
Gosh, it just makes me think of our mom and just the torture of
Right?
raising us.
That's a great word.
Yeah, because it's a family. We're a family of all boys, and just the tolerance she had to allow us to be feral.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, incredible. What took you to South Florida from Ohio?
My father's parents lived in St. Petersburg, and we had gone on vacation in the summer. And, if you grow up, if you're in Ohio and snow, and my parents had talked about it. My dad had a good job at a trucking company, a big trucking company. My mom worked there. That's where my parents met. Then when they got married, she was a housewife. Her brother worked on the loading docks. It was huge. Their biggest company in the country at one time. But my parents thought, what are we doing in the snow? Why don't we get out of here? And we were sitting in the kitchen at the table. And Brian, my youngest brother, was a baby if he was even born yet. And my parents said, "What do you think of the idea of moving to Florida?" And we were like, "Wow, that'd be great." And while we were having this conversation, a real estate agent from Century 21 knocked on the door in the neighborhood, cold calling families, and asked if they were interested in selling their home. My parents took it as a sign, put the sign in the yard, sold the house. We got in a car and drove to Florida. So that's how I ended up in Florida.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My parents had made enough money on the sale of the house that my dad found a job. He didn't have to have one when he got there. Found a job, bought a house, and that's where we started in Florida. It's 1977. I think it was 77.
Yeah. Wow.
So you took us to the point in your story where you really jumped into the construction world, right?
Yeah.
And so now you're a radio talk show host.
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
The short story is when my brother Tom was killed in Iraq, the war started. Tom was a Marine. in the first Gulf War under Bush 41 from 1990 to 1994. He got out of the Marine Corps. He was in California where he was stationed. He came to Arizona. And I always wanted to live here, which is a whole different story. So in February of 95, we moved in, we lived together. He went to work as a corrections officer at the state prison. And then in 2000, he had met and married his wife. She had 3 small children that he adopted. So he re-enlisted, this time in the Army. So that was in 2000. 2003, the Iraq War starts. March of 03 is the invasion into Baghdad. My brother's unit followed the invasion in. They weren't part of the original invasion, but he deployed in March of 03. On Memorial Day of 03, he was killed. So it happened on Memorial Day, very early in the war. It was still a very big story. I was the family spokesman, so I'm the oldest. So I went and talked to the media. I did the press conference for the family, which was a hilarious story. Well, if you're sick and twisted like our family, it was a hilarious story. My brother Brian, my surviving brother, is a cop. Massive kid, hardcore cop. And all Brian could do through all of this horrible time was cry and throw up. That's all he could do. And I made fun of him relentlessly for it. And so we had to go to this press conference that was organized at the hospital my mother worked for. On the way there, he was getting sick. And I said, Brian, it's going to be a video camera and 3 reporters taking our picture, and we'll be out in 10 minutes. Don't worry about it. And as we got closer to the hospital, I said, but wouldn't it be funny if there were like hundreds of people and satellite trucks, and he's shaking his head like, that's not funny. And I said, give me a break. We pulled into the hospital and there were satellite trucks and 300 people in the atrium of this hospital. My brother looked at me like I knew. And I said, I had no idea. I was kidding. He ran straight to the bathroom to throw up.
Yep.
And we went to the podium, and I had just written the bullet points of what I wanted to make sure we said about Tom. And I spoke about my brother, and I spoke about the guys he served with, and we spoke about the president and our support for the war effort. And then I spoke about the protesters at the end and their right to protest, but remember that you're protesting protected by the very people that you're protesting against. And I said all these things, and when I got done speaking, the people there cheered so loud that it scared us. It startled us. And when we left there, and I believed, I just have to talk about my brother. People need to hear what my brother did for this country. And I came back to Arizona. I spoke at a memorial service back in Fort Myers. I was the officiant at his funeral in Colorado, went back to Florida. When I ended up back in Arizona, I started to be asked to speak at events, pro-troop events around the valley. Someone asked me if I would join the Bush campaign. This was 2004 now. He was killed in May of 03. In 04, I was asked to join the Bush campaign as a volunteer, which I did. And I ended up speaking all over the country, the President's Ranch in Texas, the Capitol Mall, and doing interviews. I was on Fox News and CNN and Sean Hannity and big, national shows as a guest. And someone said to me one time, man, you're pretty good at this. Do you want to try it? And I said, I'll do it on the weekends. I said, I'm not quitting my job. I own a company. I said, okay, we'll do it Saturday morning. And that was late 04. And in 2005, I got hired part-time. And in 2009, I got my first full-time contract. And in 2010, I shut down my business. And I've been doing it ever since.
Wow.
Like everybody else. I just said, here's a radio show. That's how it happened.
Wow, what a story.
I promise you this is the truth. I have always felt like in this job, this is exactly where God has me, if that makes sense. And so I've never been nervous. I've never been anxious. I work hard at it, but I've never been anxious because I know as sure as I'm sitting here, it doesn't matter how long I do it or how good I think I am at it. When this isn't where God wants me, he'll take it away from me as quickly as he gave it to me. Yeah. And that's always let me off the hook, that I'm here because he wants me here. I didn't make this happen, and I can't make it unhappen. So just work hard and enjoy it. And so I've never been nervous. I honestly feel I did not create this, and it's just a great ride. It's just kind of fun.
That's got to be a really great place to be when you have to share lots of words every day, that you're never sharing false words because you think it's what someone wants to hear.
And it's also, I try to do it with the best of intentions. And even that, I have people, it's my biggest disappointment in this job is that there are so many people that don't like me. They don't know me, but because of my political stance on things, they don't like me. And I don't know why it bothers me, but it bothers me. I genuinely go into every single day with the best of intentions and without any malice in my heart. And It's just weird to be in a business where you can open up an email and have somebody tell you, we think so much alike, which is nice, but somebody else that just hates you, that just thinks that you're the worst person in the world. You have no character whatsoever and you're hateful. And that's difficult sometimes.
Yeah, that would be difficult. I'd burn those.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it also keeps you from, you can't get too hyped up on this one. You can't just read the accolades, but you also know, and they don't know you. They don't know your failures. They don't know your insecurities. They don't know the bad things about you. So they've got this picture of you. Well, this person has no idea of your good side and they just despise you. So there's somewhere in the middle is the truth, you know?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's not about you. It's about
No.
the things you're talking about.
Right.
And it really isn't about you as a person.
Right.
I'm sure you just have to tell yourself that daily.
Yeah, I guess.
Mike, as the political divide has continued to widen in this country, has that dynamic of people either loving you or just deeply hating you, has that increased?
I don't think it has. I think what it's done is make it more tribal. So if you liked me before, you defend me fiercely.
Mm.
And if you didn't like me before, I am the downfall of I'm part of the downfall of the country. So it's become more severe. I don't think it's more widespread. I just think it's more passionate on both sides.
Yeah.
And it's weird because the more that happens, the more I try to be the bridge. I bring on voices that disagree. I would much rather have that conversation, but it's still, so if I bring somebody on that I disagree with, Senator Gallego and I get along well. The guy's a Marine. He's a decorated war veteran, and we don't agree on anything in policy, but I respect him. Well, my side of the aisle hates the fact that I would say anything nice about him. And you should be, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring him in the studio. I'm going to hit him over the head, and then he's going to come back for more. That's a great career choice. The other side gets upset with him for giving me credibility by him being in the studio. That's the thing to try to overcome, is that those conversations are the ones you're supposed to have.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't be just sitting in a room with people that agree with us all the time. How boring is that?
Right. Yeah, it just becomes an echo chamber.
It does.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point of inviting in and being comfortable with the different perspectives, right? Because there's something to be learned from somebody that has a different perspective, a different life experience, and being respectful of that. You don't have to agree, but respecting that and honoring people for, being willing to have like a disagreement and a conflict, which we know that in a company culture, conflict can be a necessary and healthy thing to bring people together.
Yeah. And sometimes, I don't think I can ever go into a situation believing arrogantly enough that I'm going to say something that's going to turn a light on. They're going to have an epiphany and change their mind. But if my goal is to gain their respect, I talk about the right to life issue, which is such a hot button topic with people. And I'm unapologetically pro-life. I am never going to think that I'm going to convince someone that's pro-choice to change their mind. But if I can get them off of the narrative that I want to control a woman's body, or that if I can get them to respect that my opinion comes from a good place, as wrong as you think I am, that might be the only thing I can accomplish, but it keeps the dialogue open and we can have a conversation about things. So sometimes that has to be the goal, as small as it is, that you just walk away respecting my opinion. And sometimes that's just the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a perspective of conflict, like resolving conflict, where one way to look at it is that when you're going to resolve conflict, someone wins, someone loses, right? But the best way to look at it is that when you're really having good, healthy conflict, that something better for everyone is created at the end. And so when you have these conversations with people who don't agree with you over and over and over again, and it's happening in a healthy way, the real amazing result that could happen is something better than either side could ever come up with on their own, but something together it's a better creation and more innovative way for policy or politics or whatever. Yeah, but we're not there yet.
But you have to have everybody in the conversation that agrees with that premise.
Sure.
And in my world where it gets messy, and we see it in American politics with the divide, is that the base of both political parties don't want that. They won't allow it. That if there is a Republican and a Democrat that sit in a room and do exactly that, we're going to hash this out and do what's in the best interest of the country. Their base is going to call them a coward because they dared to work with the other side. And I think that's, politically speaking, and I don't want to get too political, but that's where our problem lies, is that any concession you make to the other side is seen as cowardice and weakness, as opposed to compromise that's good for everyone. And that's where it gets difficult, because one-on-one, you're 100% right. And if you work in a business culture where the goal is what you're saying, you work in a wonderful place. But if it's management versus union and you give in anywhere, you've just let your membership down.
Yeah.
If you are management, you've let your investors down. Instead of, we have this amazing vehicle for everybody, let's work everything out for everyone. That's the atmosphere you want.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. We're nowhere close to that right now.
No. No. It is good for business. I'll say that. It is good for business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. When you look to the future, you're a busy man with a lot going on radio and TV and guest appearances and all the things that you have going on. What's your future vision for yourself, the continued career path?
I love what I do. I've gotten to a point now where I think about legacy, not what are people going to say about me, but how am I going to feel about what I leave behind? I just want to do good. If you remember the last speech that Martin Luther King gave when he gave the mountaintop speech, he talked about longevity. Longevity is good. We all want to live a long life. He said, but I'm not worried about that now. He said, I just want to do God's will. And as trite as that may sound, I just want to do good. I wish that could be the thing that I can do. I want to be a voice. I'm a voice for first responders. I just did a ride along with DPS. I'm getting ready to do a ride along with a DUI task force for a holiday weekend. And I'm just going to observe because I want to be able to talk about what they're doing. I sat down with a firefighter that talked about wrestling with the tragic things that they see in their day-to-day life. I just want to be a voice when it comes to education. I want great schools. I don't want to be a voice of division. I want to be a voice of solutions. For me, that matters more than anything else. It's not about ratings. I'm certainly not going to get nationally syndicated at my age. That's not going to happen. But if I can use the time I've been in this business to be a voice of influence somewhere for veterans and for education and for first responders, that's my goal. My career goal is to be a voice for good.
Yeah, that's great. We have a good friend who recently moved into a role as peer support for police department, local here in the Phoenix area. And he was just talking this morning about just the heaviness. You mentioned that firefighter that's working through those awful situations that they run into every day. And just the weight of, pulling, a kid that has drowned out of a pool or, a really bad car accident or whatever the situations are. And, these guys, the peer support guys, they rush into the scene to make sure all the first responders are okay and what support they need. And just incredible work. And I can't imagine the emotional weight of all of that day in and day out that these first responders have.
And how great it's been that the mindset is shifted, that 20 years ago, talking about any kind of feelings was a sign of weakness. And a cop would be worried that if they go to someone and say, I need to talk to someone, you're going to take their badge and their gun because they're flawed. And now there has been more of an open attitude of go and talk with someone. There's programs. The 100 Club has apps that you can go online very anonymously. One's called Fireproof for the firefighters. The other's called Bulletproof for cops, where they can get some mental health guidance. And it's become encouraged now, where it was so discouraged before. I think those are all such positive things because what you carry, what you see and what you carry has got to be awful for them.
Yeah, for sure. We always hear in the media about this mental health crisis, and, it's a very real thing that people need to, the shame of it needs to go away. But I also think there's times when it gets hijacked just so people can put a label on themselves and be a victim.
Sure.
If you need support, people need to go after it and leave the shame behind. There's no shame in it.
Mental health is no different than physical health. You can have a cold or you could have a terminal illness. You could be struggling with something emotional and small, as much as it's still a real issue to you, to very serious mental illness. We would never say to someone, if they don't feel well, don't go to urgent care.
Right.
Don't take an aspirin. Don't You know what I mean? For even something small, we would encourage them. Why would you ignore that? A small infection turns into a major infection. And but somehow you're right, with mental health, there's been this stigma that when there's something going on, instead of vocalizing it and asking somebody, you just let it fester until it becomes something you have to deal with instead of choosing to deal with it. I'm glad that it's changing.
Yeah, for sure. We had a previous guest that had so much kind of emotional turmoil going on. It showed up as like physical ailments, and he couldn't walk.
Yeah.
Until he really focused in on his mental health before those physical symptoms would resolve. And I don't think a lot of people think about the impact.
Yeah.
Broadly.
What emotional and mental health does to your physical well-being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Horrible.
Let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
I know that you are a huge education advocate. I've heard you talk a lot about the East Valley Institute of Technology. You've been really involved in kind of their development and the work that they're doing. That's incredible. You're kind of right at the center of a lot of education discussions. I know you took a lot of fire during Red for Ed.
I sure did.
Yeah.
Fired back too.
Yeah, I know. If you had the opportunity to kind of snap your fingers and reform education and change it in some meaningful ways that will benefit society, what would that look like?
I think voters would be a lot more aware of who they're electing to school boards. I'm as guilty as that as anybody else of not being educated. I know who I'm voting for my county board of supervisors and city council and Congress and Senate and president. But I don't know that we're aware of who we're electing to school boards. I think school reform starts with involved parents. I think parents being involved and engaged again, the biggest reform would be that ultimately parents are in control. I think that's why school choice has become such a big thing, is that parents now feel like they have a mechanism that sends a message, that it's not just that I'm pulling my kid out of the school, but I'm going to take dollars with me. And there's power in those dollars. And I don't want to see public education ruined. I want to see it thrive. And I think the only way that's going to happen is if it changes. It's weird because I'm called the conservative, and I'm usually arguing with people that call themselves progressives. But the one area that they don't want to make progress is they don't want to change the way they've been doing things forever. And that forced change, I think, from school choice, for me, if I could snap my fingers, would be parental involvement and control at the center. And then school boards that were responsive to that. Transparency, not just that you can do a Freedom of Information Act request, but real transparency. They're talking about it with ESAs in Arizona, and I think it's great. We should reform and make sure people are spending money and shine the light of day on it. I've said on the air, I will hold the flashlight while you go through every page of the ESA expenditures, and we should get rid of the bad ones. But then you hold the flashlight and let me go through the pages of the district schools and what they're spending money on. If we had that kind of mindset that everybody's going to be held to the high standard, we'd reach the standard, and we just don't. And we had the one, I think maybe silver lining of COVID is that parents were seeing more than they had seen before. And then when parents were going to school board meetings and they were shut down, you're going to turn a parent into an activist instantly when they feel like you're not doing the right thing for their children.
Yeah.
And we saw activism in that sense. So snapping my fingers, I would keep that sense of activism in all parents to really affect real change in the public schools, because no matter what we do, the public school system is going to be the biggest way we educate our kids. Let's make it as good as we can. Let's pay and retain really good teachers. Let's coach up the ones that are not good teachers. And let's get rid of the ones that shouldn't be teachers. It's like any other profession. But the snapping of the fingers, I think, starts with parental involvement and control.
Yeah, absolutely. We agree.
So sorry about the long-winded answer, but
no,
the topic I get to talk about, I'm in the right room, but it's so weird. I feel like such a hypocrite because I was such a bad student, but even more so now I appreciate it so much more.
Yeah.
And I just want it to be the best. I just look at my education and I think, thank God those teachers didn't give up on me. You can't tell me that in 1985 that we were better then than we are now. And we've got to get back to that. So even these rebellious kids have the basic tool belt that when they finally get their act together, they've got the tools to learn.
Yeah.
I still have the skill of learning. Dr. Crow, Michael Crow at ASU said this to me, I think on my podcast. He said, all we do is create better learners. When you leave elementary school, you're qualified to go to middle school. When you leave middle school, you've now qualified to go to high school. When you get your diploma, you're now qualified for college. When you graduate from college, you're qualified for a master's degree or a PhD. All we ever do is create people that just become better learners. And I thought, what a great picture of education that is, that I had the basics to be able to learn. And that's the best we can do for kids. You know, the work you guys do with these kids, I think about this and I think there are kids that everybody else has given up on. And in some cases, they may have even given up on themselves. Their parents may have given up on them.
Sure.
But all it takes is for the light to go on. And all of a sudden, what they don't know they already have becomes useful. And then it's important to them. And you just don't want it to be where it's too late. And I just think it's such a value not to give up on them as long as they're not giving up on themselves. And it's remarkable. If you're not there, where would they be? We know what the statistics are. And giving a kid, I'm an example of somebody that was statistically impossible for me to accomplish what I've accomplished.
Yep.
But I did it. I wish I could go back to those teachers and say to them, you didn't give up on me and you wondered, I wonder whatever happened to that kid, you know? Did he end up in jail? And I said, nope, I didn't.
They might know. They might know where you landed.
Yeah.
Some might.
Well, but you're right. I mean, statistically, someone who doesn't finish high school is bound for our correction system.
Right.
I think 75% of inmates don't have their high school diploma.
Right.
It's a staggering statistic. And then you look at kind of the economic impact of, you know, the cost of incarceration, and it's in the hundreds of thousands per inmate. And that's, you know, one of the things that we're going after is not only the social cause of helping other human beings, but there's an ROI for the state's economy with the work that we're trying to do.
And you can't expect a kid or even an adult, you can't expect someone that doesn't care about themselves to care about anybody else. If you've given up on yourself, you have no concern for anybody else in the world. If you have no self-respect, you have no respect for anyone else. There's a difference between arrogance and self-respect. Self-respect is a feeling of you hold yourself to a standard. And I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to like myself for doing it. And you can't expect them to have any respect for someone else if they don't have respect for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we can just get them just long enough, like Chris said, and you guys were really all talking about this, where we can build a little bit of trust with an adult, and that adult can say, you're a leader. You're leading yourself. If nothing else, you're leading yourself, and you're going to lead a family someday, and get them to believe that and have a little bit of confidence, then that's when their life actually can change. But we have to have them long enough to build the trust for an adult to say that to them.
Well, in a home life where it's a stable home life, a parent gives a child enough rope and lets them fail, but they're there to pick them up when they fail and get them to not fail that way again. Well, when that doesn't happen at home, who is the adult that does that? Who is the adult that says what you're doing is a mess? But then when they prove it, you're not turning your back and saying, I told you so, and turning your back on them, but being there to rebuild them and say, you can do better. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do with somebody else's kids. And I'm so sorry I can't remember his name, at the event that I spoke at of yours, the teacher, big guy, big muscular guy.
Oh, Uriah?
Yes,
He was-
Uriah.
Yeah, he was here.
Just
earlier.
missed him.
Yeah.
I did. He was here?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Hearing his story after and talking to him about his family and the way he grew up, I can't imagine with the magnetic personality that guy has that those kids are not gravitating to him.
Oh yeah. He's like the Pied Piper.
Right. And to
Yeah.
have a tool like that, to be that magnanimous and to have that kind of a personality, to be able to say to these kids, because all those kids want to be big and strong and all that stuff, to be able to use that and say to a kid, you can be anything you want. But you also can destroy your life if you want.
Yep.
You have to choose. And when you choose unwisely, you're going to pay for it. But then to be there when they do something stupid, to coach them up.
Yeah.
What a tool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I had so much fun talking to him after the event. He was encouraging to me when I started hearing his story about his big family and everything else. It's great to have someone like that that's an example, that's willing to share those stories with kids. They see us where we are. They don't realize that I'm 58 and I still feel like I'm 14. I don't think I know any more than I did then. I've just experienced more.
Yeah.
And to be able to look at them and say, I remember being there, and come here, come here for a minute. I just think that's such a useful, what you do with those kids, there is a better way. And we're not giving up on you until you give up on yourself. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, he was just describing, he was in here earlier, about, mining for diamonds and how you have to chip away at it, but you have to believe there's a diamond in there to even want to mine for it.
Mhm.
And that's his mentality. And it's what we want for all our staff, that every student is a diamond. You can't see it all the time right away, but if you believe it's in there and you chip away at it, you will find it. They'll find it.
There are a lot of jobs where you can just go to work and do your job. This isn't one of them.
No.
It just isn't. It's a calling. I talk about first responders. That's a calling. Educators, especially in your situation, it's not a job. And if you look at it like it's a job, it's not the job for you. That if you're not passionate about these kids, if you don't realize that you're not going to reach them all, but like you said, you're going to find a diamond. If you don't have that mentality every day, I don't know how you do the job. I don't know how you do it. I love what you guys do. It's the groups, it's the kids. It's one of you mentioned EVIT earlier. I have a friend that teaches over at WestMech in the West Valley. But it's the reason why I love EVIT so much, is watching some young kids. Many of them do go to college, but many of these kids are kind of in a situation where they need to go into the workforce. They started a program at EVIT for foster kids, because when foster kids graduate out of the foster program, they are allowed to have free college, but many of them aren't qualified or ready or able to have to go to college. They have to go to work. Well, imagine a kid that's a young adult. I still call them kids, but a young adult that's graduated out of the foster program, that now can live on that campus and then go get a skill. And within a couple of years, if you're a journeyman welder makes $80,000 a year to start.
Yeah.
To realize they're going to have something that will give them that life they want. But what you guys are doing for kids that feel like, I'm destined for the streets. Look what just happened at Maryvale High School.
Yeah.
And the tragedy of that story, and the fight that happened the night before over a gun, and then it ends up in a death. You got one kid dead whose family will never have him back, and another one that's going to go to prison, and his family's going to look at him through glass for the next 15 or 20 years. What a tragic ending when your world is so small that is enough to ruin your life over.
Right.
Terrifying.
Let's talk about COVID-19 and the fallout of that.
Sure.
It's something that we're dealing with on a daily basis, right? We have kids enrolling in our schools all the time that are, now 3 years behind because they were doing, online school for 2 years while some of these districts were shut down. And now they're waking up at 18 years old thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't graduate on time. I don't know what my future is. I need something, right? And ultimately, we're just catching that wave of hope that they're currently on through, our outreach and marketing efforts. And they catch a vision of like, oh, I could graduate high school and then I could go on to the next thing. It's significant. And from our perspective, it's going to take years to unwind that, because there's even kids younger that are,
the emotion,
way behind.
The social acclimation and interaction tool, that part of it, that it just, you're isolated. It's different.
It's hard to go into high school anyways.
Yes.
It's just the social aspect of it.
Yeah, sure it is. I look at that time, and again, we can have the political fights about it, but that's the thing with the adults, is that we're either going to stand on opposite sides of the street and point fingers and throw rocks, or we're going to acknowledge where we are and come up with a plan to fix it. Should we have had kids in school? Absolutely. Should we certainly have had kids outside together and not isolated in the house? Absolutely. But what are the real ways that we can get them caught up, to make them acknowledge and understand, you didn't like that this happened, but it happened. It's like we did it with Hurricane Katrina. I know that's a dumb thing to say, or a dumb analogy, but Hurricane Katrina happened. And there were people that grew up in New Orleans that were displaced and ended up as far away as Phoenix at the Coliseum. You can't change what happened to your city, but you can pick up the pieces and do what's next. How do we instill that in kids? But how do we come up with the plan that gets them the life they want, that just may be delayed a couple of years? And I don't know how you deal with that challenge as an education professional, but that's the message, isn't it? That it's not over. It happened, but it's not over. You're either going to let it define you, or you're going to define it.
Yeah. And I think it's ultimately going to require innovation. And how do we close these learning gaps? And, the traditional model of pacing curriculum at a certain rate throughout the school year, that's not going to ultimately be the answer.
Right.
There's ways to augment and supplement the learning to try to close those gaps. And I think broadly, that's what's going to have to happen. That's what we do because we're dealing with a lot of kids that are behind and have lost a lot of time in education, is we're closing those gaps as quickly as we can so they can get on with life. And I think that's going to have to broadly be applied to fix this. And I think it's several years of work that's going to have to happen.
Yeah, but it's a commitment as well. It's
Correct.
a commitment that we're not going to quit, in that, we owe it to them to give them the best chance. They're going to have to do the work, but we're going to have to be the vehicle in which they do it. It's a tough place that we're in, but it happened and we can't change what happened. It's just, how do we dig out? And that's one of my frustrations with the education system, is we've still got the battle lines. We're still fighting each other over what happened. Well, we know what happened and we can't change it. So how do we work together to move forward? And it just seems like it's become so much about the money. And that's what the ESA argument is about. It's not, is it in the best interest of the kids? It's about who gets the dollars.
Mhm.
And in the end, if people really are concerned about kids, and I believe they are, it's going to have to be, how do we pool our resources to get these kids over the finish line?
I do think that something that has happened recently, these little small things for the social gaps, is the cell phone changes that have been implemented, because it's forcing kids to relearn how to talk to each other and how to put their phones away and engage in small groups and engage in conversation. And that is a huge part of the social impact, is kids don't know how to talk. They don't
Right.
know how to engage. And so that's a little, like, put your cell phones away. But I think it'll actually have a big impact.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so much life skill that comes along with that, right? I was noticing that in my own kids, right? If they wanted to go out to eat somewhere, right? And, we would be the ones always, making the reservation or whatever. And now we've gotten to a point, and my kids are old enough to where it's like, no, you call and make the reservation, so that they learn how to talk to people on a phone, not text. And I think that's going to be part of the responsibility of education, is teaching some of those basic life skills that, in the modern world today, that they're not naturally picking up.
I have to remember at my age that I'm of the generation that remembers what it was like not to have a cell phone. Growing up with literally a device in your hand your entire life, it becomes a part of your life. And showing them there's a whole different world out there that, they look at us like we're the Amish. Everything is so wonderful at their fingertips, but at the same time, it can become such a buffer where they don't have to have real interactions with people, and how dangerous we're finding out that is. We all do it. You can create a different personality online.
Mhm.
You can be what you want to be online, and the world believes that's who you are. And you're a mess on the other side of that screen. And how do we break that barrier down, where it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to not be perfect, and have a friend that you can go to and
Mhm.
say, I need help?
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so much hiding, right? And I know Chris might tell you about it later, but I think the one part about the Teen Victory program is it goes and finds, right? It goes and finds the kids that are hiding, and brings them back to society, back to culture, and there's more to it, but that's huge, is there's just so much hiding, and we have to start finding these kids.
And the reward of human interaction and relationships. I think that's the other part of it. I don't think they understand the true reward that comes from a real relationship. One of the examples I've given about school choice, and maybe you've heard me say it, is I don't know of a parent that would want to move their kid to another school if they didn't have to, if they didn't feel like they needed to. I grew up in a neighborhood called the Villas, and I was a Villas kid, and I rode the school bus in 6th grade with my closest friends, and I'm still friends with those kids to this day. When I go home, I have friends I've literally known since 1977, and we're all still friends, and we live thousands of miles apart. We keep in touch about the dumbest things, but it's our childhood. We rode the school bus together. We went to football games. We went to the dances. We played on each other's front and backyards in the summertime and had sleepovers, and that life that you'd want. And the school was a central piece of it.
Mhm.
There's not a parent I know that wouldn't want that situation if it wasn't the right fit, or if the schools weren't failing. There's a reason why parents pull their kids from that atmosphere. And we've got to get back and change that. If we can change that, then we've got the socialization part of it. Is I've known this kid since I was 12 years old, and we played football in the front yard, and we went trick-or-treating when we were kids, and we got into trouble, and we've known each other our whole lives. How many of us can say that? Everything now is on the phone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And giving kids the joy of a relationship, that I have friends that I've had for all those years that I can call on a moment's notice that cheer for me. I don't know if you've seen it's funny to say to a video on Instagram after we're talking about this, but there's a video online and it's weird because it says, this is the kind of relationship I want. But I'm watching it on a phone and it's a bunch of little boys at a baseball game. And it's one kid's birthday. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm.
It's one kid's birthday. All these kids are probably between 8 and 10 years old. And they're at a baseball game. And they're yelling to the baseball player, it's his birthday, it's his birthday. So the guy throws him a baseball. And when he catches the baseball, all of his friends are and cheering for him and patting him on the head and on the back. And they said, these are the relationships I want. I said, but you're looking at it on Instagram.
Right.
Go do it. They're out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing of it. We all look at that and cry and say, that's what I want. But there's literally millions of people around you. How do we build those, get them off of Instagram and live that life instead of saying, that's my Instagram life?
Yeah. Amen.
I'm preaching to the choir with what you're doing, but it's got to be frustrating for you that you're right in the middle of it. And it's got to be the ones that are doing the work that have to be the most frustrated sometimes.
Yeah, and I think we're created to be in community. That human interaction and the relationships are vital to every part of our being, right? We're physical beings, we're spiritual beings, we're relational beings, and you have to have all three of those for humans to flourish. And anytime that relational side gets cut off and it's strictly behind a screen, that's why you see the implosion of, mental health issues. And I'm not a doctor, but this surge of autoimmune conditions. And, I can't help but think it's all related to some of the dynamics of this modern world.
You mentioned spiritual health, and you're right. No one will ever shake my faith after what happened with my brother. And I mean, praying every minute when I had to speak in front of a group that I can't get through this by myself, really believing that I was being held up by God. No one will ever shake my faith. But that doesn't mean that I am in a good and spiritual, healthy place. Isolation tears you away from all of that. Sunday mornings at church isn't just about going to church to sing the songs and listen to the message. It's about corporate worship. It's about commonality. It's about relationships. It's about seeing people you enjoy seeing because you only see them at church on Sunday, hugging people that you see once a week, and the common bond of, man, it's been a rough week. Let's get back together. Let's pat each other on the back. Let's hug it out. And now let's go out and take on the world for the rest of the week. That's spiritual health comes from a community. And it's the same way in education. It's the same way in sports. Every coach that I've ever coached with, and I've coached with some great ones, will tell you it's what happens in the locker room. A dysfunctional locker room, and it's dysfunctional on the field. But when you've got a team that feels like a team, they can do more than they could ever do individually, corporately.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's the same way in your business.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a corporate environment where the team matters most, the team accomplishes more than any spectacular individual you have in the team.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the fight, is to get them to believe in that.
Yeah, and I think really the takeaway for teens that happen to listen to this, or parents of teens, to think long and hard about that and really evaluate, how drawn in you are to your device as opposed to these, real tangible relationships that are available to you, and strive for something different.
One of the best lessons I learned was from a friend of mine that's a pastor, and we were in a class, and it's to this point. He said, if somebody were to come up to you today and say, I'm struggling with something, would you pray for me? How many people would raise their hand and say, absolutely? And every hand goes up. I would do that, and I would be honored to do that in a heartbeat. But then he said, how many of you are willing to go and ask? To send a message to a young person and to ask them, hey, if someone came up to you and said, can I sit here? I don't have anybody to sit with. How many of us would say, absolutely, sit down, what's your name? We do it in a heartbeat. How many of us are willing to go to someone and say, can I sit with you? How many of us are willing to be the vulnerable one that said, I just don't have anybody to talk to. Can I sit with you?
Mm-hmm.
How many kids would be willing to jump out of their comfort zone to reach out to someone else as opposed to being willing to be reached out to?
Yeah, that's hard.
It's got to be hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's all about vulnerability, which they just don't have a lot of practice with.
Right. but they also don't have the experience of the joy in it either.
For sure.
You know, we were thrown into it. I remember, I think we all probably do. I remember standing at the school bus stop 6 feet away from each other because nobody knew each other. Nobody said a word. But within the first 2 days of school, you were best friends. It just took something to bridge the gap. You know, and if you're in the neighborhood with each other, you become friends. By the time school starts, you're friends. You're thrust into the situation. We just don't have that mechanism anymore. We can be as isolated as we want now. I mean, heck, you can take a Waymo without a driver if you don't want to talk to somebody.
Yeah,
You know
I've
what
done
I mean? Yeah. And sometimes the peace and quiet's amazing. I don't have to interact with anyone.
Yeah.
But we can be that isolated, and we can get fulfillment by watching other people do it.
Yep.
Look at how much fun they're having. You know? It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
He's feeling guilty because he loves to watch videos.
Oh, listen, don't get on my list because I will send you more videos. I watch those videos during commercials. I am the Reels video king.
Oh, yeah. Mine is just full of comedy and pranks, and I'll just sit there and laugh by myself. It's kind of embarrassing.
Oh, I love it. We have cameras in the studio that only work when the microphones are on, because if those cameras were on during the commercial breaks, you would just see me laughing and sharing videos constantly.
Yeah.
You two on a text thread, and either one of you can get any work done.
I get sucked into it too. You know, there's some hypocrisy, but the truth is there's some really funny people on the internet that have way too much time on their hands. Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between that kind of a distraction, because it used to be before the phone. For me, it was YouTube. I used to teach at a church, and I'd sit down to get ready to teach my class, and I'd be doing class prep, and I'd find myself watching Dean Martin roasts on YouTube. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Watching Jackass episodes on YouTube. I just would get sucked into the one video to the other. So that's the way it used to be when I was sitting in front of a screen. Well, now I'm carrying it. And when your algorithm, when they pick up what you like, forget it.
Yeah.
They're feeding you exactly what you want all the time.
Yeah. It's pretty sophisticated stuff. They know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Probably on a lot of people's algorithm.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sure.
I'll bet you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that are as concerned as you are, and I think that they're seeking answers, and when they start seeing what they like in answers, they gravitate to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My brother in Florida said to me, we were in New York watching his son play in a basketball tournament over Christmas, and he said to me, do you ever watch those people that cook on Instagram because he knows I love to cook? And I said, all the time. He goes, there's this dude in Arizona, and he goes by 3 pieces of pecan. So he's a friend of mine. His name is Chance Cosby. My brother says, are you kidding? He goes, so I called Chance, and I said, I'm sitting with my brother. He goes, tell him that I love his sheet lasagna. So when you find, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's got to be people out there that are talking about, I've got a kid that I'm losing my mind. So smart, got such potential, but just won't. They've got to find you guys and say, oh my gosh, finally. You know what I mean? I would imagine that's got to happen. There's hope. There's people out there that are investing in this specifically.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you hear that ChatGPT story recently for our newly enrolled student? Okay, so there was a kid really struggling, dropped out of high school, looking for something different, told his dad really, really trying to get him back into a school. And so he said, okay, what is it? What would it take to get you back into a school? And so the kid lists some things, and he's like, yeah, that doesn't exist. That school doesn't exist. And he said, but, just for fun, I'm going to stick it into ChatGPT. Find me a school that has this, 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 and this. And one of our schools pops up. And he said, oh, I guess it does exist. Called and enrolled the kid. So he used...
See?
Thank you, AI.
So we're in the AI.
Yeah.
We're somewhere.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's great. Yeah.
Good story.
Yeah. Well, Mike, we certainly appreciate your time. We know your time is valuable. With your story, just woven throughout the whole thing is just the story of resilience and not giving up, getting back up when you've been knocked down. Your faith is a very important part that's woven throughout that. It's very clear to me, but also the positive influences of your grandfather and your coaches and other guys you coached with along the way. And those are really important aspects of, for people to see and hear as, they may be struggling to figure out, what's next for them, or parents or educators that are trying to figure out how to influence some students that maybe starting to disengage. And that's exactly why we wanted to have you on the show, because it's an incredible story.
I appreciate it. If it's of any use to anybody, I'm happy to tell it. I can't run from my past, but I've been blessed. I've had a blessed life. A lot of it is because of what I had when I was a kid. I had the basics, and sometimes the basics are all you need. And I fear for the ones that don't. And those are the ones. I'm sure you guys know this. One of the first laws that was ever created before we were ever a country, when people first came here, was called the Old Deluder Satan Act. And it was because it was if any town has more than 50 households, they would hire a teacher to teach their children to read. And it was so that the deluder Satan couldn't fool them and that they could read the scriptures for themselves. I'm not trying to preach a sermon, but when you talk about that being a good reader, that was a core belief of the founding of this country, that if we can teach our kids to read, that they can accomplish everything, that they will figure out how to fix the problems, but we have to teach them to read. And that was the cornerstone of it.
There's that American history.
Look it up. It's one of the compelling stories.
I think
Old Deluder Satan Act.
I'm going to tell my kids that, because I tell them that all the time. I said, I don't care what you do today, just work at reading. So I'll share it.
And it's the other fun part about it is with kids is if you want to prove me wrong, go prove me wrong. But you have to be able to read to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Jump on ChatGPT or jump on Google, but you have to be able to read the answer and prove me wrong. But they can't prove you wrong if they can't read it for themselves.
And
they got to take you. They got to take your word for it.
Yeah.
Because we all know we love to prove our parents wrong. There's no better feeling. I told my mother she was dumb until I turned about 18, and she got smarter the older I got.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Looking forward to those days.
Yeah, it'll happen. Yeah, it will.
Yeah, I know. And it's coming quick. So, well, thanks again, Mike. We really appreciate your time.
I appreciate the time. Hope it was useful.
It absolutely was. Thanks.